live on the
You're live.
YouTubes, I would appreciate. Oh, great. We're live. Hello, YouTube. Hope you all are well. Welcome back to the Lurie Daniel Favors Show here on this Urban View Experience. Grateful to have you here. Little later in the day than we usually do our lives, but on Wednesday, we often have our guests in the first hour of the show, which starts at 10 a.m. Eastern. So catch it when you can, because that's how these things go. But I wanted to talk today about what's happening with the economy. And again, another encouragement for you all to also check out the podcast that's taking place later on today. The podcast episode, rather, which will be released at 2 o'clock today, is going to talk a whole lot about some of the things that we're going to breeze through today in the reverse. It breezily touches on some of the things we're going to talk about today, but really centers this question of who do you listen to and why do you listen to them, and are they actually worthy of you listening? And I provide a series of questions that you should ask in the podcast about how to not just think about the people that you listen to, the people that you follow, the people you subscribe to, but to think about whether or not they're actually good for you to listen to, follow, or subscribe. And that it goes for me as well. You should never just be taking anything that I say at face value. You should be investigating. That's why I like to provide sources so that you can go back and fact check and do the research for yourself. So today's podcast episode is really important because it also responds to people who are in the YouTube comments who often say things like, it wasn't my group that said no reparations, no vote. It wasn't my group that said only vote down ballot and don't vote for the president. Those two examples feature very prominently in the conversation. So again, really encourage you all to take a listen to the podcast episode at Lurie Breaks It Down, which will be out today at 2 p.m. However, we got some news we got to get to on the economy because it, once again, is always about the economy. And we're in a moment right now where the crazy thing about the economy is that talking about the economy and doing things like raising India's tariff rate to over 50% to match what you did to Brazil, Donald Trump, is not going to stop people from talking about the Epstein files, which I know is what you're trying to do. But we're going to talk about the economy, aware of the fact that the reason you're doing what you're doing to the economy is to keep us distracted also from the Epstein files and because you're greedy and plan to take a lot of wealth out of the system. All of those things matter. But let's talk about what's happening in the economy today. The radical leftist known as Mike Pence, former vice president of these United States. He being the radical leftist that he is, and I'm saying that completely tongue-in-cheek because Mike Pence is a wholly owned subsidiary of the Republican Party. But he tweeted out the following, quote, John Deere is laying off 238 workers at 3 factories in Iowa. The company said tariffs and lower commodity prices are to blame. Tariffs costs in the quarter were approximately $200 million, which brings us to roughly $300 million in tariff expense year to date, said Director of Investor Relations Josh Beal. American companies and American consumers pay the cost of American tariffs. Time to get back to free trade with free nations. Now, in this environment, you might, end the quote, you might be excused if you thought that was something a Democrat had said, because it's giving Democrat, okay? But that's basically the former Republican vice president who almost got lynched at the certification of the vote in 2021. Y'all remember the Hang Mike Pence, Where's Nancy? They had a whole ass functioning gallows to hang people at that said revolt and revolutionary attempt at insurrection, which was so successful. Everybody who was involved in it got pardoned by the president in chief, who himself being a fully convicted criminal of 34 counts. Before we even get to the Jeffrey Epstein stuff, it makes sense when you think about it that way. But he's not a wholly owned left-leaning radical leftist. He is the former vice president of these United States who served under the current president of these United States. And he was responding to this article that is now in the Wall Street Journal. The Wall Street Journal, a very, very conservative right-wing outlet that has been sort of at odds with Donald Trump right now. The reason I'm talking about this is because it's the economy, stupid. And even though the headlines don't quite seem to be catching up with things in this country, this is one of the reasons you all should be reading international news. And yes, I'm going to quote from the Wall Street Journal, but international news really helps to inform a lot of what we should know about what's happening in the country right now. In the Wall Street Journal's opinion page, there is an article about the fact that House Ways and Means Chairman Jason Smith, who was a Republican member of the Congress, basically issued a press release talking about Donald Trump's trade agenda. And he said Trump's trade agenda is going to fuel an economic boom. And that's curious because he's from farm country. And so we should look to what's happening in farm country where they are fa-foing. They fawed and now they fold. And by that, I mean they fucked around and now they find it out. According to the Wall Street Journal, Deere Company, the John Deere tractor company, which is one of them companies that really relies on healthy economies for the farming community in order to thrive. They basically have decided that the tariffs suck. like most corporations in this country who have decided that tariffs suck. And it's not even so much that they had to decide it, because every economist who actually knew things, like Lisa Cook, who Donald Trump, who does not know things about the economy, is still trying to fire from the Federal Reserve. She done already said, child, we filed a lawsuit against this bullshit, this wholly illegal attempt at firing me, the one black woman on the Federal Reserve, since you couldn't get to the white man. But, that's white against white violence, and we're going to leave that alone for the moment. But basically, John Deere, as a corporation that relies on the people who often vote in favor of Republicans and Republican policies, is going to lay off hundreds of workers at 3 of their factories in Iowa: Waterloo, Iowa; East Moline, Iowa; and Moline, Iowa. I think I might be pronouncing Moline. It's Moline. Apologies to Iowa if it's wrong. But basically, y'all getting your factory shut down. Congratulations, because you did vote for this. You asked for this. You went to the voting booth, even though you knew Donald Trump was running on tariffs. You knew what happened to the farming community the last time Donald Trump issued a tariff policy. And what happened? Farmers had to become the biggest welfare queens. When we've already talked about y'all being welfare queens, don't be offended. We just saying what it is. Y'all get more subsidies than a little bit. And y'all don't even participate effectively in farming. You don't do so in a way that's going to make you economically viable. You couldn't exist on the free market. How do we know? Because you never have. You get all the subsidies in the world. Oh, absolutely. I'm sorry. Hold on. We got to correct this. White farmers could not operate on the free market because you're welfare queens. And it's not shade to you. It's just to acknowledge that you often vote for the elected officials who are going to harm your capacity to participate in the free market all the time. And so when they pass these policies that are going to harm your farms, then what do? You get a bailout. But you don't consider it welfare because you're white, even though the black farmers don't get that. And what did that black farmer tell us in that video we heard a couple weeks ago? There's power. What did he say? There's pain in privilege, because y'all can't make it without the privilege. And so we now have John Deere, a company for the whites. Well, it's really a company for farmers, but many white farmers rely on this. And basically, John Deere, just in 1 month, reported a 26 drop in net income, a 9% drop in sales due to lower commodity prices and ding, 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 higher tariffs. It's those higher tariffs for me, according to the report, according to a statement by the director of investor relations, Josh Beal, who was quoted by the radical leftist Mike Pence. He said the following, quote, "Tariff costs in the quarter were approximately $200 million, which brings us to roughly $300 million in tariff expense year to date." $300 million? You're paying $300 million? Oh my God, that's almost as bad as Ford losing out on $1 billion or GM losing out on almost $1 billion. You companies are racking up a lot of money in tariffs. If only the companies were paying for the tariffs, but they're not. We, the people, are the people who buy things. According to the article, quote, John Deere, the company, expects the pre-tax damage from tariffs to, quote, reach $600 million in the current fiscal year, up from a previous forecast of $500 million. The hits are coming from President Trump's tariffs on India, the European Union, and his 50% border tax on steel and aluminum. The costs hit Deere's earnings and ultimately unemployment. What was that again about the new GOP and the working class? Yes, what was it about the new GOP and the working class? Weren't we supposed to be dealing with a new Republican Party that cared about the workers, and especially the white workers? This is my moment to remind all of you that white workers as a class, you tend to be the easiest people to trick on the planet, the easiest marks on the planet. And what do we mean by that? Y'all historically have been so easily snookered by your wealthier cousins who really can't stand your white poor asses, but you connect with them because they convinced you that racism was a good thing and that being white was all that mattered. And you're so busy believing these people who play you like a fiddle on a regular basis that you forget that you got way more in common with the black people and the Latino people and the Asian people and the indigenous people that you have been taught that you're better than. You got way more. One, you're not better. Two, you've got way more in common with them than you would ever have with your wealthy billionaire cousins. And three, you're actually not better. You're inferior to them because, again, you are the only one out of those groups who cannot survive on your own. Those groups have had to survive on their own. You are the one that's dependent, and you should figure out why that is. But going back to the article, according to this report, John Deere, according to previous reports, GM, Ford, American companies are really, really struggling right now, all because of y'all's president's tariffs. Now, Donald Trump seems to believe that issuing the tariffs is going to allow for American companies to bring back the manufacturing. So we should interrogate that. We should ask, is that what actually happened? And we have just the clip to help us to do it. I mean, if you could please cue up the clip from from the folks at CNN who had some things to say about this. And YouTube, I'm going to actually share my screen so you all can see this as well. Amina, let's take a listen to this clip.
And Pamela, the two main reasons why President Trump says that he likes tariffs is that he wants to shrink trade deficits, but also bring manufacturing back to the United States. So we set out to answer that question. Has that actually happened? How many companies have moved 100% of their manufacturing to the United States since President Trump took office? Well, the answer, pretty clear. Zero. And we've looked at big companies and mid-sized companies and still came up with that same answer. Of course, there could be some smaller companies that we don't know about, but the ones that we track, zero. Companies, though, instead of moving all of their manufacturing, have moved some manufacturing to the United States. And big companies that are really important to the U.S. economy. Apple, IBM, Johnson & Johnson, foreign automakers, Hyundai, Ford, and NVIDIA, the AI chip maker. And they have invested quite a bit already into the United States. Look at that.
Now,
Apple,
Amina, I want you to
$600
pause
billion.
right here. Please pause the clip.
IBM, 100.
Let's pause right here. The reason we're going to pause right here, and actually I'm going to stop sharing the screen. The reason we're going to pause right here is because what people need to know is everything you saw on that screen. Actually, no, let me keep sharing the screen so you all can see the numbers on the big screen. Everything that you're seeing here is not money that's actually been invested in the United States. It's money that was pledged to be invested in the United States. So Apple pledged $600 billion. According to the reports, not one red cent, not one red, white, nor blue cent has actually been spent. These companies have pledged a whole lot. Ford pledged $5 billion, but they done lost almost $1 billion just because of the tariffs. Now, Amina, if you could press play, we'll go back to hearing the rest.
$50 billion, Johnson & Johnson $55 billion, Hyundai and Ford together $26 billion. And then an interesting way that NVIDIA is bringing revenue into the United States, 15% of all of their AI chips sold in China, now those sales coming back into the United States.
That sounds like socialism.
Really, the hurdles to setting up manufacturing in the United States is high labor costs and just the ability to manufacture the items themselves because there isn't the manufacturing set up here in the United States. A company called Afina, who I spoke to, they make shower heads. To produce one of their shower heads in China costs $129 for consumers to buy. But if they were to source the parts and make it right here in the United States, it would cost more than 80% more, $239 for the consumer. So the CEO wanted to see, hey, will any of my customers pay more if it's made in America? He sent an email to 25,000 of his customers and asked that very question.
What did they say?
Here is what he found out, and here is what he told me. Watch.
We sold 584, I believe, of the made in China version, priced at $129. And unfortunately, zero made in the US version, priced at $100 more.
Were you surprised?
Yes.
Okay, so there you have it, Pamela.
Shocker.
Zero people were willing to buy a shower head at $239, even though it was made in America. So that is a hurdle that many companies face. They want to be able to bring manufacturing here to the United States, but it's too expensive. And then if consumers don't buy it, you're out of business.
Wow, that's a shocker. I'm stunned. I'm shocked. I'm surprised. Who would have known that Americans would not spend $239 for a shower head because it's 80% more than the shower heads made in China? But MAGA, come on. I thought you guys liked made in America. Where's the MAGA buyers? Don't the MAGA people love products made in America? USA, USA, MAGA, US. Ain't that what y'all do? Ain't that what y'all said? You love tariffs. And we know you love it because you voted for it. You were so excited about it. You was like, we going to get tariffs and shit. And Donald Trump going to implement tariffs. And we going to have cheaper eggs and raw milk and groceries. Meanwhile, have you been to the grocery store lately? This is important because not only are we talking about the economy, not only are we talking about the ways in which people are getting shafted when it comes to how much money we're spending, we're also talking about the job market. And the reason this matters is because we have had just in 2025, yes, I know we got the 300,000 black women that have been laid off, but have you looked at the other numbers? It's over 800,000 layoffs that have taken place just in 2025 so far. 800,000 layoffs in the country nationally, which means that black women made up almost half of the nation's layoffs. I'm pretty sure, I haven't checked this, but if I was a betting woman, I'd be willing to bet black men made up another significant portion. But we're talking about almost 1 million layoffs in 2025 so far. The Trumpflation economy sucks. You saw how many corporations were able to bring back their manufacturing to the United States. A big fat zero. None of them. Zilch. Nada. Nine. Ninguno. Niet. Nothing. Zero. Double zeros if you're counting. And so not only do we have that, we've got increasing a recognition that corporations don't have the capacity to bring back manufacturing here in these United States because it costs too much money. But did you catch that, what she said about NVIDIA? Did you catch what she said about those chips? What did she say? She said the American economy, us taxpayers are going to be, because our government is now apparently no longer a believer in the free markets. They no longer believe in capitalism because the United States is going to be taking a 15% interest stake in a chip manufacturer. That it feels like a little Fidel Castro-ish. It's giving a little state socialism for the wealthy white corporations. And what is this going to do to increase the number of people getting hired in America? Nada, nine, niet, zero, zilch, nothing. Because in addition to that, we also realize that we can look to a number of metrics to determine what's happening in the economy. Yes, layoffs are one thing. Yes, factories closing is another thing. But how about credit card applications? Have you applied for credit recently? Chances are, if you did, you got a 50% chance just about of being denied. 48% of consumer credit applications have been denied over the past year. As someone who used to represent people in bankruptcy and who used to represent people who are dealing with debt collection and who fought to defend homeowners who were about to get kicked out of their home to foreclosure, that's bad. That's a bad metric. When half of the people applying for credit are getting denied, that's bad. When now 1 in 4 young people are using layaway programs to order food off of DoorDash or to pay their bills or to buy whatever they need to buy, we have a problem. We're also seeing refinancing rates. People who already have an existing line of credit, be it a mortgage, be it a car loan, be it some other form of credit, you're attempting to refinance. Those rejection rates are they're above 40%. These are not good signs because that is the highest rejection rate in over 12 years. We've got unemployment being forecast to increase to 5% by the end of the year, but we don't really know if we can trust them numbers because your orange Cheeto president fired the head of the Bureau of Labor Statistics. So any numbers that seem a little fugazi, gonna be fugazi. People who are out of a job right now, it's taking more than 6 months for them to find a job. Most people have less than a month's worth of cash in their household and could not come up with $500 if they needed to. Now, that metric has been existing for a long time. What's challenging is that more people are now a part of the group of folks who could not afford it, to afford anything. And while this is happening here in these United States, while we've got corporations that are now being socialized by a supposedly capitalist government that is now taking ownership interest in the leadership profile of the company in terms of who gets to own the company versus who doesn't. We also have this situation where Donald Trump is still skeeting tariffs all over the place. Excuse me as I reach for my copy of today's Financial Times, in addition to the fact that he, as you can see here, is threatening the Fed, which we just talked about. But we also have some articles in the New York Times talking about the fact that right now your president is in a whole ass battle with the European Union over digital rules for digital properties. Whereas in America, they don't mind if the AI tech companies just take all your shit, your copywritten whatever, and they're going to take it, they're going to learn on it, they're going to trade on it, and then spit out to you some information that's going to feel original, but it's just an AI generated machine that's just spitting back at you something that somebody else put together. Europe is like, what we're not doing is that. In Denmark, they now have given you the right to own your face. So AI and artificial intelligence organizations and corporations can't take your image and do what they want with it, or they will be facing serious penalties. That would be great to have here in these United States, but it's not likely. We also have a situation where we are seeing tariffs. Hold on, where'd it go? Hold on. I was looking at, I can't find my article. I hate it when this happens. Hold on, y'all. I was reading my article today. Oh, India, sorry, y'all know I love me a paper copy of the newspaper. India is holding firm as punitive tariffs loom. Why? Because your president got mad that India was buying oil from Russia. So he increased their tariffs, even though we get a lot of shit from India. We also have this situation where now Brazil and Nigeria now have created a direct flight system between each other. So Africa and the global south is like, we are on top of this. We are making things happen. You Americans and Europeans can do whatever the fuck you want. The rest of us are going to get our shit together. But then we also have this de minimis tariff tax situation that's about to kick in. You have so many countries that are refusing now to ship to the United States. We're going to talk more about this tomorrow. I'm just trying to squeeze this all in before we get to the end of the show. We have so many countries right now that have paused shipments on these items that are considered, quote, de minimis. Now, de minimis shipments are things that, let's say you get a whole lot of stuff from Shein, right? Or a whole lot of stuff from some of these like Temu, these sorts of places. There used to be a tax policy that would allow for certain amounts of items that were really too small to be considered really valuable beyond like a certain amount, maybe $800, maybe $1,000. You would be able to ship them into the United States without them being tariffed. That was a big deal. It was a big deal because most of the stuff we buy is cheap shit from other countries. And if you don't have a tariff example or exemption, then you create the situation where the cheap shit that you're buying isn't really cheap anymore because the tariffs that you're paying on it is worth more than the cheap shit that you bought. Well, what is now happening is that the United States has ended that tariff exemption, which means tariffs are now going to be applied to the cheap shit that we buy that's under $1,000 that used to be tariff free. So if you buy, a box from Temu or Shein and that box costs you $5, you will be able to get that thing into your house, mailed to you for $5 and maybe some tax and shipping and handling. Now you're going to have tax, shipping and handling and tariffs, and your tariffs might be $10. Do you really need that cheap ass $5 box if you're going to have to pay $10 to bring it into the country? These are the questions people are going to have to ask, but it's not just something that we're asking internally in terms of our own independent budgets. It's also something that is now freaking the fuck out of small businesses because this tariff exemption is coming to an end. According to CNN, small businesses are panicking right now because international postal services, the mail services, you know how we got United States Postal Service, we got UPS, we got FedEx, and that's how we mail things. Well, the versions of those companies that exist in other countries are, quote, suspending shipments to the United States after an exemption on tariff duties for small packages is set to expire. It's the latest example of how President Donald Trump's sweeping trade policy is impacting U.S. consumers and businesses. This Friday, that de minimis exemption, which essentially would allow for shipments of goods that were, I said 1,000, it's 800. I'm sorry, I misspoke. I used the wrong number. I said 1,000. I should have said 800. They're basically now in a situation where as of this Friday, that de minimis exemption is over. And because it's over, shipments of goods of $800 or less are no longer going to be allowed into the country tariff free. And what that means is you're going to have to pay them tariffs. But here's the kicker. A lot of international companies don't believe Americans are actually going to pay for the products. So what that means is if I ship a whole bunch of products to you and they're just stuck at the port because you as a corporation refuse to pick it up because you can't pay for the tariffs, which is what was happening at the beginning when they first began implementing tariffs. And remember, we talked about how the docks were empty and there weren't a whole lot of people working on the docks. Well, now that we're all seeing increased prices, get ready for those prices to increase even more because now that the duty-free exemption that was going to allow those items to come into the country without tariffs, they're tariff laden. And depending on the country and the confusion around the rules, because that's the other challenge. I'm like, if I'm India, do I have a 25% tariff on this or is it a 50% tariff on this? If I'm Denmark, do I have a 25%, a 35%? Am I getting the same treatment as the European Union? And is the tariff on this or that on the other? Because Donald Trump said it was a tariff on this, but then he said a tariff on that, and then he said a tariff on the other. I don't even know. So the international community is as confused about what Donald Trump's tariff policy is, as are all of us here. And they no longer want to bear the burden of that risk. And so what's basically happening is that the corporations in other countries that are sending shipments have decided, we're not going to send anything. I don't know what's happening here. It's really messy in the United States. And what we're concerned about is if we ship things to the United States and then they don't want to pick it up, then we got to ship to have it sent back to us. They don't know what the fuck they're doing. So we're just going to stop shipping to them. They are no longer sending packages for items that you may have ordered if they cannot get clarity on this de minimis policy. And it's not just like an individual country, right? It's Europe. It's Asia. According to the report, European and Asian postal services have taken matters into their own hands by announcing plans to, quote, halt shipments as early as Monday. Singapore's Singpost and India's Department of Posts said that they will also temporarily suspend some shipments to the United States. International Postal Service, DHL, said August 25th, DHL, that's another one. I said UPS, United States Postal Service, FedEx. DHL is another one we're all familiar with. They got the red and yellow lettering. And they said August 25th, which was 2 days ago, August 25th will be, quote, the last day that it accepts shipments to the United States, joining its European peers in halting shipments, including the Austrian Post, which will also stop accepting shipment orders to the United States as of yesterday. According to the Austrian Post, there's currently insufficient information available on the customs clearance procedures that will be required in the future. This tightening of regulations poses major challenges for all postal companies worldwide when shipping goods to the United States. Did you hear that? Causes major issues for all companies worldwide when shipping goods to the United States. The rest of the world has said, y'all are stupid. You elected somebody who's stupid and who makes decisions that are harmful to us. But because we are not sycophants for the orange cheese puff that you all seem to have elected or did not fight enough to not have elected, we don't have to play that game with y'all. Y'all go head on and do that. You like it, we love it, says the rest of the world to America. You got it, little boo-boo. Come on, little tink-a-tink. You got it, America. You can do it. But you can't do it with us. You can't do it with us. And so here we are in August, Black August, to be specific, at a time where major American corporations are shutting down factories. The stated goal of y'all's president's effort to implement tariffs has failed. There have been not 1, not 20, not 50, not 100. There have been 0 corporations that have moved their manufacturing back to these United States. Donald Trump is issuing tariffs with such rapidity, he don't even know what tariff he done issued. And here's the other part that I want to make sure that you all are clear about. You know how I say announcing a deal, a trade deal, is not the deal? As a former corporate attorney who, before I represented people in bankruptcy and fought to keep Black people in their homes who were facing foreclosure and defended them from debt collection lawsuits, before I did that, in addition to suing the hell out of the police, shout out to the NYPD, I was a corporate lawyer. And as a corporate transactional attorney who was a part of teams that represented multi-billion-dollar corporations in multinational trade deals, you can announce whatever you want about what your trade deal is. But it's not until the lawyers and the finance folk get to memorialize that deal on paper that any of this actually matters. What that means is you can announce whatever you want on Monday. It's going to take a long time for that deal to be memorialized. There have been no memos, no trade memos released, which give us at least a summary understanding of what the terms are. There's no details. After they announce that there's a trade deal, the group that they said that they got this trade deal with is like, what are you talking about? We never agreed to that. We have seen so many world leaders sit down next to Donald Trump and think they're going to announce one thing, and then Donald Trump says they're doing this, that, and the other thing, which they ain't doing none of. The rest of the world has had it. They're over it. This little 8-month experiment now leading into a 4-year experiment that this country has tried, nobody else has to play along. Nobody else cares, because as China told the Americans, we've been here for 5,000 years. Y'all barely scraping 250. You ain't even a $2.50. Most of the Chinese existence has been one that did not have to even consider America. And what did Chinese representatives say? We was here long before you. We gonna be here long after you. What's happening right now on the continent of Africa? Honey, between Burkina Faso, Ibrahim Traore, what's happening, the good things happening in Namibia, how Ghana's getting this citizenship thing together, how everybody else is moving on. Once I saw that there are now direct flights between Brazil and Nigeria, honey, the rest of the world is moving on. And I just need us to know it's a much bigger, badder, and not bad, because I don't want this to be mistaken. It's a much bigger, amazing, and dope world out there. We ain't stuck here. I know it feels like we stuck here. I know some of us are like, I can't leave. I don't know. And maybe leaving in your ministry, that's fine. Just know that dealing with an existence that is only defined by what's happening within the borders of these United States, honey, that is not our ministry. That is not what the Lord has for us. That ain't our destiny. Our destiny, if I call on my memory of Octavia Butler's reminder in her Earthseed series, the parable of the sower, parable of the talents, our destiny is the stars and beyond. And I'm not meaning physically we going into the stars, because that's giving a little too elongated muskrat trying to colonize Mars. What I'm saying is these people who have only been in relationship with us from a perspective of dominance and oppression, they are not the authors or the finishers of our faith. They are not in any way, shape, or form to whom we should consider the Alpha or nor the Omega. They are not in any way capable of doing anything that we in a Kuji Chagalia spirit say, you can't do this. You can't sit with us. You can't consume from us. We certainly ain't going to consume from you. We do not have to look to these people and their teeny tiny, flaccid, limp, weak, lazy, non-intellectual. We don't have to look to our genetic children many millennia removed for anything but an example of what not to do, for an example of who not to be, and for an example of how we should not be structuring our societies. So as we consider what's happening economically, save your money. Save your money, save your money, and then explore. If you can't physically leave and go explore another country, research other countries. Research how other things are happening in other places. We spent the first half of the show talking about this is Black Breastfeeding Week. For those of you on YouTube who weren't a part of that conversation on Urban View, this is Black Breastfeeding Week. And as a part of Black Breastfeeding Week, we can look to ourselves as answers for things. We don't have to look to these people for anything. We can do this ourselves. We just have to believe it. And I just am glad I get to be a part of the people who are telling you, believe it. Believe it. We have to go now. YouTube, we appreciate you. Please make sure you check out today's podcast. It is really important that we get a structure. It's important that we have a structure to vet people who get to sit in an influencer space, myself included. It's important that we have a structure and a framework for evaluating people when they offer strategies and tactics to our community that have real implications for all of us. And today's podcast episode is really in response to a number of you who have been a little concerned that I've called out groups like ADOS and FBA for being a part of the misinformation and disinformation campaign. Again, not all of them, not wholly, but enough that it caused a lot of concern. So in today's podcast, which will come out at 2, also remember it's called Lurie Breaks It Down. Appreciate you. We'll be talking about that intensively and extensively. And I want you to use the framework that we have provided in the podcast episode to evaluate all of us, myself included, because I am not perfect. And we want to make sure that we are walking in integrity. YouTube, we appreciate you. Urban View, I need all of you to figure out how your purpose aligns with the needs of our people. Walk in it with your back straight and tap into your heritage.